I never thought an ordinary drive would turn into the strangest night of my life. It started on a late Friday evening. I was driving along a deserted highway that stretched endlessly through the countryside, the kind of road where the silence presses on your ears and the headlights carve only a narrow slice of reality from the darkness. My car, an old sedan that had served me faithfully for years, began to stutter. At first, it was a small hiccup in the engine's rhythm, almost too subtle to notice. But within minutes, the sound grew into a grinding cough, and the steering wheel trembled under my hands. I pulled over to the side of the road. The asphalt was cracked and faded, almost blending into the dry grass that leaned into the edges of the highway. When I turned off the ignition, the silence was unsettling. There were no passing cars, no streetlights, not even the hum of distant cities, just darkness and the faint hum of crickets hidden somewhere in the tall grass. I stepped out and opened the hood. The heat from the engine hit me in the face, carrying with it the bitter smell of burnt oil and metal. Even though I wasn't a mechanic, I could tell something had gone seriously wrong. A belt had snapped, and the oil level looked dangerously low. There was no fixing it here, not in the middle of nowhere. The night grew heavier. Clouds slid across the sky, covering the thin crescent moon. I pulled my phone from my pocket, but of course, there was no signal. No bars. Just the blank word searching, mocking me. I decided to wait inside the car. The seats creaked as I settled in, and the dashboard lights faded one by one until only the dim glow of the battery remained. The air grew colder, and condensation began to creep across the windows. My breath left pale streaks on the glass. That's when I heard it, a sound, faint but sharp, like metal tapping against metal. It came from the road behind me. I turned, staring through the rear window, but there was nothing. Just the empty highway stretching into blackness. I told myself it was the cooling of the engine, nothing more. But the sound came again. And again. Closer this time. Hours seemed to pass. My car felt less like a shelter and more like a trap. My flashlight flickered weakly as I pointed it outside, illuminating the cracked pavement, the weeds pushing through it, and the skeletal outline of an abandoned billboard further down the road. The advertisement had long since peeled away, leaving only rust and wood splinters. I decided to walk. Staying put felt wrong, as if something invisible pressed on me with every passing minute. I grabbed my jacket and stepped into the night. The air was heavy with the smell of damp earth. Gravel crunched beneath my boots as I walked along the road. The silence wasn't silent anymore. It was filled with whispers of wind, the creak of unseen branches, and the constant sensation of being followed. Then I saw it, a faint glow ahead. Not headlights, but something softer, warmer. It spilled across the road like liquid gold. I hurried toward it, my pulse racing. As I drew closer, I realized it came from a small gas station. Or rather, what was left of one. The pumps were covered in dust and rust, their handles dangling like broken limbs. The windows of the store were shattered, and vines crawled up the sides of the building. But inside, faint light glowed from an old neon sign, buzzing as though it still clung desperately to life. I pushed the door open. It groaned loudly, echoing in the hollow room. Shelves stood empty, their metal frames bent. The smell of mold and gasoline hung in the air. Yet the register still sat on the counter, its keys coated in dust, and behind it, a calendar froze time decades ago. I should have left, but something kept me there. I wandered through the aisles, brushing against old snack wrappers, brittle with age. That's when I noticed a staircase at the back, leading down. The steps were narrow, hidden behind a warped wooden door. Curiosity overpowered fear. I descended. The air grew colder with each step, and the smell of rust thickened. My flashlight cut through the darkness until it landed on something metallic. It wasn't a basement at all, it was a tunnel, lined with steel walls. The gas station wasn't a gas station, it was a cover. I followed the tunnel for what felt like forever. My footsteps echoed against the walls, and drops of water dripped from unseen pipes. The deeper I went, the more the air hummed, as though electricity pulsed just beyond the metal skin of the place. Finally, the tunnel opened into a vast underground chamber. Machinery towered around me, blinking with weak, dying lights. Generators hummed faintly, their sounds like whispers. In the center of the room stood something I could hardly comprehend. A massive circular structure, like a broken ring of polished steel and glass. It looked like a machine. A machine built for something impossible. Time bent around it, I could feel it in the air, a vibration that rattled my bones, a shimmer in the edges of my vision. That's when I realized, my broken car had led me here, to this forgotten place buried beneath the earth. The car wasn't the problem. It was the key. And the machine before me wasn't broken. It was waiting. I stood in the silence, the hum of the ring growing louder, the air thick with energy. I didn't know what it would do, or what would happen if I stepped closer. But one thing was certain, nothing about tonight was ordinary anymore.